Hello, welcome to geometry. Today we are doing section 02. There's already a typo on my slide. It is about segments, rays, parallel lines, and planes. If you are listening to this, you are a student at Simile, I assume. I'm Miss Sylvester. I'll be talking through these notes today while your teacher is out. If you're one of my students, awesome. If not, that's cool too. Right now, first thing you're going to do right off the bat is pause the video and please copy down the words on my screen. Once you have those copied down, go ahead and press play and you'll hear me talk through them and tell you what you need to know. So when you're ready, press play. All right, hopefully you actually listened and copied those down. I'm going to zoom in here. My first word is segment. A segment is part of a line consisting of two endpoints and all the points in between. The major difference between this and a line is that a segment has a start and a stop. So I think of, we have one point where it starts, one point where it stops, and then we have all the points in between. To label those points, we'll call one A and one B. My B looks kind of sad, so let's make him better. If I want to name a segment, I need two capital letters and a line with no arrows on top. So I could call this AB with a line on top, or my other option is BA. Those two things say the same thing. You can choose whichever one you'd like to use. Again, you can flip-flop your letters and it's the same name. Your next word is array. Array is part of a line consisting of one endpoint and all the points to one side of it. So imagine it's like a beginning point and then all the lines in one direction. You do need another point on your array to name it. Let's call this A and this B. When I name array, we're going to use two capital letters and a line with one arrow. But the key here is we have to start with our endpoint. Your endpoint is this guy here. For us, it's A. So if I want to name this, it's AB, and then a line on top with one arrow. I cannot flip my letters for this one. A has to be the first letter because it's our endpoint. Our next word is opposite rays. Opposite rays are two collinear rays with the same endpoint. Remember, collinear means they're on the same line. The key for naming them is that they just start with the same letter. I'm going to zoom in a little bit so I can draw my picture better. If I want to draw two opposite rays, I'm going to have a line. And then I'll probably have, well, I will have at least three letters on it. Let's call it A, B, and C. The blue side would be one ray, and the red side would be another. So I know that AB and, excuse me, sorry, I already did that wrong. I know that BA, and let's actually do that in red. Sorry, I'm struggling. BA would be the name of one ray. It's the red one. It starts at B and goes towards A. And then BC would be my second ray. It is the blue one. You might notice that in my pictures, both of my lines on top point in the same direction. When you're naming a ray, the line with an arrow on top will always point to the right. We don't write things like BA. That's just not like proper notation. So that one we don't do. And it doesn't matter which way your ray points in space. Your arrow will always point towards the right. Your next slide, again, pause, write down these words quickly. Well, doesn't have to be quickly. And then we'll move on and talk about them. The first one is parallel lines. Parallel lines are coplanar lines that do not intersect. We've learned about them before in intermediate algebra as lines with the same slope. They look something like this. Remember, I can name a line with like one lowercase letter. Usually it's a fancy like cursive one. I'm going to zoom just so I can actually draw what I need. So maybe I have a fancy cursive L. And maybe this one's line M. If I want to denote that they're parallel on the line, they'll have these little arrowheads in the middle. That means parallel. Now, if one has one arrowhead and the other has two, that means they're parallel to different lines. But if they both have the same number, then they're parallel to each other. If I want to name them, we use the symbol for parallel that's like two L's. So I would say line L is parallel to line M. Sorry, my E is weird, but this sign here, my two like capital L's almost, means parallel. I always remember that it's those two lines because they're in the word parallel. They're the L's in the middle. The next thing we're going to talk about are skew lines. Skew lines are lines that are non-planar and not parallel, and they don't intersect. I think of them as, I don't know, when you draw them, they'll look like they intersect, but they don't actually. So I may have one line out front. I may have one line out front like this, and maybe there's one behind, and it's going to be behind it in space, so it's not actually going to touch it, it's just going to be behind it. It's hard to show you. When I come back to school tomorrow, and hopefully your respective teacher comes back, I have a really good way to show it with my arms, so hopefully we'll show you then. So don't stress too much if you're like, Miss Sylvester, that drawing makes no sense. We'll talk more about it when we have a moment and I'm actually there in person. There's not a fancy way to name skew lines. You just write out the word skew if you want to say that they're skew. Your next word is parallel lines. Parallel planes, excuse me. Parallel planes are planes that do not intersect. They're similar to parallel lines. Maybe you have one plane. Oops, I want this. One plane that's up here. Maybe you have one that's down here. They don't intersect, so you would say they're parallel. The statement you would write is really similar to this one, except for you'd have plane, and then you'd name it is parallel to plane, and then give it another name. My picture's too small, so I'm not going to name it, but that is how you would. We're going to talk about example 1. It says name the segments and rays in the figure below. Remember your segments have start and end points. Segments. So I see one segment here, that's BC. Remember you need two letters in your line on top. You can flip-flop your letters, so I can also call it CB, but that's actually the same segment. So that's my first one. For my second one, I see, let's do a different color. This one here. No, I don't want to highlight. This guy here. I would call that AB. Remember you need your line on top with no arrows. You could also call it BA. Those two are the same segment. Now if I want to name rays, the only thing that changes is that there's a specific order I can name them in. So if I'm calling something a ray, we have to use a certain order because we have to begin with our endpoint. For both of our rays, it's going to be B, because in this ray, it goes on forever in that direction. So my first ray would be BC. Remember, you need a line on top with one arrow. My second one would also have to use that endpoint, and then it would go on forever in this direction. So we would call that one BA. And that's your first example. This extra bit down here is from the last week's notes. It just didn't get taken off my slides. But that is naming segments and rays. The next part says name segments and rays in the figure below. We are doing the same thing. I would like you to try this one on your own because it's just as I explained the last one. I'm going to pause and write the answer on my screen just so you can check your work, and then you can move on to the next one. All right, there are your answers for try now number 1. Notice I have 2 options for each of my segments. Either one of those would work, but you should have 3 different segments named. And the last one, we have 2 options for arrays. Both of those need to start with R, and they both need the arrow on the top pointing to the right. If you're missing either of those elements, you name them wrong. Example 2 says use the figure below to answer the following questions. Name all the segments that are parallel to AE. All right, I'm going to go ahead and just draw over AE so we know what we're looking at. AE is this segment here, and we need anything parallel to it. Remember, that means it has the same slope. They kind of run in the same direction and they'll never cross. The first one I notice is this guy here, DH. Those ones would be parallel. I also notice CG. It's like kind of kitty corner from it, but they would be parallel to each other. And then the last one I see is BF. You should have 3, but because we're talking about segments, we could flip-flop our letters. So I could call this one HD. I could call the green one GC. And I could call the yellow one FB. Those are all options for you. The second part says name all the segments that are skew to AE. I'm going to erase this just so we can talk about it. Okay, when we're talking about skew, we need something that they're on different planes and they won't intersect, but they also aren't parallel. So we already have AE, that's the red one. We're looking for something skew to that. My first option is going to be HG, because if I extend HG, it's going to like continue behind AE and never actually touch it. So HG would be a skew segment. Again, you could call that GH if you want. I'm just going to erase my extra back here so I can see what's happening. And really, you're going to kind of look for something that's similar to HG again. My next option would be the one that's parallel to HG, DC. Again, DC would be running back here. AE would be up front. Now, if I extend AE, it looks like they cross at this point here, but really AE is way in front of DC. So if you like turned the box, you could see right here, there's like space in between those two lines. It doesn't look like it when we're drawing it 2D on the like paper, but in 3D, there is actually space there. Again, if I want to say DC, I could also say CD, and that's a valid name for it. We need, I think there's 2 more that are skew. My next option is going to be CB. Again, this one's going to run forever and ever and ever. It looks like they cross here, but they don't actually, because CB, that yellow line, is just in front of your red one. So my next option would be CB and BC. And then my last one is going to be down here, GF. Again, this one's going to go on forever. The red one's going to go on forever. They look like they cross, but your red one is behind the black one. So my last option is GF, which again, I could rename as FG. Again, if skew is confusing to you, wait until tomorrow. I will show you my little demonstration and hopefully it'll be clearer. For try note number 2, you're doing the same thing. Again, I'm going to pause, write down the answers. Once you've tried it, press play and you can see if you got it right. All right, here are your answers for try note number 2. You should have 3 answers for the first one, some combination of something from the top and the bottom, or the bottom, and 4 for the second one. You don't need 6 or 8. You just need one of these. These 2, they say the same thing, so you need one of those options. Same thing for the 2 green ones, the 2 red, and the 2 yellow. You need one of those 2. All right, example 3 says, use the figure below to answer the following questions. Name 3 pairs of parallel planes. I'm actually going to do all the work on the bottom, so I'm going to write the answers for A here, just because I don't have enough space. So this guy here is my first plane I'm going to start with. Remember, to name my plane, I need at least 3 letters, or you can use 4. Let's call it plane RUVQ, and that's parallel to this guy across from it, which is plane PSWT. Oh, that was an R. Those guys are parallel. My next pair is going to be like the top and the bottom. This one here, which we'll call plane PQRS, and that's parallel to the bottom, which is plane TUVW. I forgot the to. And then my last one is going to be the front and the back. So this part here, which is plane PRUT, and that's parallel to plane, the guy in the back, V, Q, S, W. The next part, we need to name a line that's parallel to plane Q, R, U, V. I'm going to just erase this quick. So we're looking at Q, R, U, V. That is this part here. And we need a line that's parallel to it. I'm going to do B in green. I'm also going to zoom. So we know that we have a plane that's parallel to it. It's going to be this plane here. And any of the lines that make up that plane are also going to be parallel. So I would say PT. Remember, it's a line, so you need a line on top of two arrows. I would say SW. I would say PS. And I would say WT. Those are all parallel to it. Again, if you want to flip-flop your letters, TP, WS, SP, and TW, that works too. All right, that is all I have for you today. We're going to pass out, or your sub should pass out, your homework for tonight. Please give it a shot. We'll talk more tomorrow, so if you have questions, we will gladly go over them then. Thank you for watching.